Let's go. We'll just Zoom, we'll just create a Zoom
That's right.
call.
I mean, it is water, right?
Give it, oh, it's 4:58. We'll give it a couple minutes.
Yeah.
We had talked to Travis today.
Yeah, but,
We talked to Travis today.
oh, I saw Travis. Yeah, I thought he was gone in like Arizona or something.
Guess he's to and fro. I don't know.
I saw him in the Pembroke the other day. He wasn't exactly friendly.
Well, he was helpful.
Oh, good. Yeah, he knows a lot of stuff.
Yeah, so.
Good. That's your tour was really good.
Thanks.
That was quite far. So,
Thank you. Yeah, try our best. And now we know if we would have done the tour after talking to Travis today, we would have had more to share.
oh, really?
Well, here's the good thing. So there is a resolution that all the trustees will get a tour of every facility.
All right.
And the one on Friday kind of came out of us meeting. It was sort of specific to the advisory water committee. And I asked Corinne to just open it up to more people because no sense if somebody's available to show up. But we only had myself and Mary there as trustees. Yeah, so the resolution is that all trustees get an orientation of every facility the town owns, including this building, water tanks, the water facility, sewer. So even though I came to the sewer plant for the Lone Tree or what it was called, you know, I think I'll be back to be able to see the inside of the sewer plant too, as a trustee, as more of a trustee orientation.
Okay.
So you'll get an opportunity to beef it up.
Great.
To take what you learned.
So that last week was really hard because we prepared for a wastewater inspection with the state. So it was particularly challenging for us that week.
So
So
really,
it'd be great if we could give a little input on schedule.
Oh, yeah, and I had hoped you had, but.
Yeah, like I basically, after that tour, I went home
Yeah.
and fell asleep. I was like.
Oh, because you were exhausted, I bet. No, and I think that's the whole point of the resolution for orientation is to have it set up. And if more than two trustees show up, it can become a public meeting. But if it's only two trustees, it doesn't have to, you know, probably the more the merrier.
Sure.
But, and this is new. There's not been a requirement for everybody to get an orientation.
Right.
Someone's on the agenda. You get a copy, Cindy.
I do not.
Okay.
I won't be staying then, just turn the Zoom.
Okay. Do you need me to know how to do something to end it?
I don't believe so. I'll be
Okay.
here. I'm just gonna be.
All right, so you'll be in your office. Okay, thanks.
she said she was gonna write us some checks for being Canadian.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
There you go.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're my.
All right. Well, it's 5:02, so we will start the meeting.
Where's your gavel?
You know what? We threw out Robert's Rules of Order for the committee as well, so, okay. We're keeping it a little bit.
She's gonna use a meter bit key.
How is that? Is it a big thing?
Kind of like a gavel.
Yeah, that's right.
Well, I'll call the meeting to order, and I had invited some other folks. I was hoping Bill Bruner might come because he expressed an interest in being on the committee, and he certainly has a lot of knowledge, but hey, it is what it is. So just for introductions, right now, we currently only have 3 members of the committee. We changed the ordinance to have a total of 6 members, but for now, I'm the trustee member, Paige Smith, and Phil Siriani represents the local water company
Right.
person, and then Mike Drake represents an out-of-town user. So we are actually missing 3 people to be on here, and I believe at tomorrow night's meeting, there will be a discussion of putting out a letter of interest because we need 2 in-town users. that are public members. And then the third member can be any one of those three categories. We just wanted to be sure to have two in-town users. So that's where we are with that. Hopefully, the letters of interest will go out soon. And then the trustees will choose, once the deadline for the letters of interest comes and goes, the trustees will see who applied and vote to see who comes on the committee. And that was so, yeah, and that should be posted on the webpage, the homepage of the website for the alerting people to that. So when I put together this agenda, it was really based on a lot of the conversation that we had Friday at the 1 million gallon plant. And we had also had information from JDS Hydro. I don't know, and I should introduce Jeremiah, and your last name, Garcia,
Yeah.
is your title. Could you give me your title? I don't remember.
I guess it's operator,
Okay,
Public Works.
all right, Public Works Operator. And Jordan Redden, what's your title?
Public Works.
Okay.
Waterworks operator.
Thank you. I'd rather you say it than
And
me get it.
you guys both do wastewater too, right?
Yeah.
So for the record, they're both water treatment and wastewater.
And wastewater, okay. Thank you for that clarification. Pulling out file. So we had JDS Hydro, the gentleman who works for them, was at our meeting, whatever date that was, May 12th. And there's some consternation about what exactly they need to do the water budget report in order to lift the moratorium. And as you all know, there's been a lot of, again, the word consternation about them not having enough information from the 1 million gallon plant for them to reliably determine how much supply there is versus how much demand there is. And we thought the 1 million gallon plant was running and that they were getting the information for a couple of years and find out that it wasn't. So now they are going to have 3 months of data, as I understand it, but that's not enough to really do this engineering report. And beyond that, I'm a little fuzzy as to what exactly they're waiting to have. And I don't know if Jeremiah, if you could elaborate.
So what they requested from us for Lamborn was basically the raw inflow and then the filtrate or the treated water totals.
Like raw inflow and say that again.
And the filtered water totals.
Okay,
Just so you know, the proper term for that is finished water.
Yeah, I've seen it different ways, even
Yeah.
filtrate. Paul calls it filtrate.
Is that right?
Yeah, so.
CPG likes finished.
finished.
Okay.
So what's sworn in, okay. And so that's on at the 2 million. What's going on? What do you know about the 1 million?
So what we garnered today from Travis is those flow meters work and they do. And what he was doing when he was capturing data was just going to the converter, one term for that device, and just recording a number. And today we lit out some air, one of the PRVs, and we saw that both springs are coming in at 200 gallons a minute. So we're like, there's 400 gallons like going into the plant and then out overflow currently. There's nothing being treated. But yeah, there's definitely a flow of water in
So that's at Lamborn or Clock Tower?
Clock, the one.
So Stewart Mesa's taking out water, Bone Mesa's taking out water, and you guys are still seeing that much flow.
And we still have more that can be turned down. And I think that's what they want to know is how much potential it has to make finished water
Versus
based on the raw.
And when you say turn down, you mean send down?
Yeah, we can divert it back.
So are they wasting any water up above if they go up and are those springs, you know?
We're gonna go up tomorrow actually, because we need to help Luke clear some paths and we'll go check it out again. But yeah, there was, and I'm still fuzzy on all the spring systems and which ones are not coming down the pipe and overflowing, which ones are coming down the pipe. So I can get more clear with that.
There's also some water rights issues up there with Stewart and Bowen Mesa and excess water, I think has to be turned if they're, that was another thing we need to clarify the water rights.
Yes.
Although when Dave Weber is coming on the board, who was instrumental actually 10 years ago in getting those contracts with you guys, Stuart, and also with Bowen Mesa. And so those water rights are pretty well defined, delineated, and reasonably secure. The question is, what Paonia gets essentially is leftovers. And probably this time of year when there's so much water, it's really hard to make any determinations about moratoriums and all that. What we really need is once the spring runoff is over, the flush is gone, and we're back down to some stable level, that will give us some idea what our water inputs could be for consumptive use.
Yeah, it's my understanding August is when we have the highest demand and the lowest flow. Right, so that's really the crux.
That's the key point. That's
Yeah.
what you gotta go, if you don't look at the lowest flow time, you're kidding yourself.
Right, sure.
Well, and one of the things I brought up to the fellow from JDS at the last meeting was right now he has 3 months of data and he needs more. Ideally, he'd have 3 years of data. But I don't think we can wait that long. So I asked him, well, first of all, if it's being metered, is it okay that water that is coming in and running through untreated, can that count? That's water that would have been available to treat and send down to the system. So I said, can that suffice for water going through the 1 million gallon? And I said, what about a 6-month period that started, say, August and went into whatever 6 months is, February, to be at the time when it's probably the least flow. Unfortunately, it's also the least demand. And I can't really remember his answer, but I don't think he thought that was a good idea. So I honestly am not sure what we're doing about fulfilling the 1 million gallon production equation for their.
Well, we can certainly every day go down there and grab a total and start collecting that data. We just haven't been doing it because it wasn't asked of us.
And I don't know if a total
Right.
is the metric they need. I don't understand it enough. So that's really a question. What metric do they actually need? Do you know, Mike?
I don't know. I don't know exactly because I'm not sure, but what you have to look at is what's your minimum flow and what's your average demand or maybe even highest demand. And you've got to look at that because the other thing that the town needs to provide, and what we're talking about right now is the status quo, and how much water do we need, right? That's what I think that's basically what you're saying. And is there any possibility of not having enough water? But I think you got to look, the town has to decide what their growth rate's going to be and make sure that their water, if the growth rate's going to go up, then the water demand is going to go up.
And that's what JDS is going to look at. It's not just a stagnant number. I think they're looking at what kind of capacity is there for growth. And I think that JDS has good sale of water information. They know what's been sold. I think they have what they need for that, but again, don't quote me on it. I get the impression they do. So we already have the demand side. It's the supply side, mostly from the 1 million. It seems to be the piece that's missing, and I don't understand what's going to be needed. So perhaps after this conversation, there could be a better directed question to JDS to get it answered. And I just don't get it enough. And I have to admit, when I'm in those meetings, the trustee meetings, it's hard to track all the information that comes in without going back and listening. So, and I don't know, Christina, I was going to ask you, when you were at the last meeting with JDS and we were talking about what they needed to ultimately do their engineering report, did you come away with any definitive idea of what they needed from the 1 million gallon?
No.
Okay, it wasn't just me.
So I'm going to ask an obtuse question.
Sure.
we essentially have been running for 2 years, maybe 3 years, basically on the Lamborn plant. Right, I mean, we have been, near as I can tell, we really haven't been using much of the water out of the clock tower plant at all. Is that a fair statement?
It's still fuzzy for me.
Well, I mean, it did run, I believe, in October of last year to fill up the 1,000,000 gallons that's in there now to keep the tank from heaving.
Right, I don't think it was treated.
But in terms of drawing
Found out it
on,
was treated.
It
We
was?
asked that question.
It
Yeah,
was treated for that much?
It was ran through
Okay.
the skid and everything.
CDPHE is not reporting that.
so one of the interesting issues for JD Hydro is, could we run our demand side on the town from the Lamborn plant only? I mean,
They don't think so.
and so that's a question for them. I
Yeah,
mean, one of the things that came out to me is that the clock tower plant's gonna be sort of a backup plant. I mean, it's gonna be expensive to run, to finish water, and probably that plant will be brought online only when we need excess water during times of drought, or when we want to draw down a 1,000,000 tank. So the real question for my view, JD, is how much excess capacity do we need over and above the Lamborn plant to supply the town? And it looks like demand is about, what, 250,000 gallons a day, 250, 280, 300, something like that.
Yeah, I've read it this
Somewhere
point in
in there.
time, somewhere in there.
And if we have the supplies at Lamborn, we can finish almost 800 million gallons, 800,000, I believe. Capacity of that plant is rated at 800, 750, something like that. So the real question is, what is the robustness of the Lamborn plant? Question number one. Question number two is, how much excess capacity will we need to draw on the clock tower plant to satisfy our demands? And then we plug that into your growth equation. Because what my sense of the clock tower plant is that it's older. It's a really nice plant. It's 15-year-old design. And it's going to be more expensive to finish water down there, in my view, than up above, maybe, I don't know.
That's possible. Now, if we turn down the water that it potentially can all get going there, the clock plant can also only do 600 gallons per minute, and that's 300 per skid.
Right,
So if we're getting an excess, some of it would still be overflow and dumping.
right.
So that's really the only capacity it has is the 600 per minute.
The other question is the crossover, the communication pipeline between Lamborn and Clock Tower. We asked the question last week whether that pipeline is in place or not.
so it's almost there. So the blueprints that I was referring to before, that was like to reroute the main line. It actually doesn't go straight to Clock. It comes into town, but there is a pipe that goes behind the clock plant. It's an 8-inch pipe. And apparently the town just needs an easement to go from that pipe to the storage tank. And it's like, it's probably 100 yards of the pipe that needs to be installed. And Travis was saying his plan was to put in a float sensor and an actuating valve, as opposed to this altitude valve. And I don't know if an engineer just got involved and decided that we needed to spend a whole bunch of money on this or what. So, and I don't know, maybe they're one and the same, but it doesn't seem like a $50,000 component.
Well, he had brought up modulating valve over altitude valve. And then that would just run off as the tank gets lower, then that modulating valve allows water to run in until it reaches that point, and then it would shut off again. So it's a way of using that storage tank while still running only one plant.
Right.
Do you know, I can't, again, I do not know that the altitude valve has actually been installed.
We heard it was still in engineering, like it's been engineered or something like that, like the plans are finished on it, it just needs.
There's also gonna be a volt associated with that too. So it's a volt and this valve.
Do we know, is that SVM doing that, or do you know who the engineers are?
SGM was the engineer is the firm that was doing the engineering
Right.
for it. I do know that,
So-
right?
I don't know yet, because we haven't seen any plans for this.
Okay, and I'm pretty sure it's SGM because it's come up during disbursements. But we've never, again, heard if it's done. So apparently it's only on paper.
So also, before this gets away, I want to clarify, so CDPHE, the number that they have is plant offline. That's the only number that they have, but that's because the water that was being created at the clock wasn't going into distribution, so technically the plant was offline. And that's why that number's coming at 0. I just want to clarify that.
But yet it has to go into the tank first
Right,
before it's distributed,
Right.
but it was going to the tank.
but it wasn't being distributed and there was no intention to distribute that water.
And they knew that for that month? And so that's, in that month of October is when they,
I don't know when you're referring to, but that's why
Okay.
CDPHE would have like the plant's offline, even though the plant is potentially treating water.
okay, simply because it wasn't sent for
Yeah.
consumption.
Yeah,
Nobody was drinking.
sorry,
Nobody was
nobody's
drinking.
drinking it.
So the water in that tank potentially was originally treated. And now it's sat too long and can't be used. But that's a whole nother thing down the list. Sorry, I'm jumping ahead.
Well, you could shop chlorinated, I mean, it could be treated.
Well, they think there's too many disinfectant byproducts in it now. That's the
is it?
concern. Yeah, too much.
So that's a good question. Are they requiring you to do, since it's offline, are you having to do EBPs and chlorines? And so basically you're not testing any of the output out of the clock
But
tower.
we only test that in distribution anyway
True.
for compliance. So, but no, so it's just sitting there and we just tell this.
And you got your turbidities and that's about it.
And that's just
They
a PO.
they only worry about the turbidity and the chlorine that's going into distribution. So since it's not going into distribution, we don't have to send them the MORs for the month. We simply put plant offline for the month.
So, I mean, that's an interesting question, because if you bring that plant online, you're gonna embrace a whole bunch of new regulatory requirements. Right? In other words, you're gonna have to, test your chlorine, test DBPs.
Yeah.
You're
Yes,
gonna be down in your distribution system.
right. Would you think we'll have like more DPDs to take?
I wouldn't,
Plants
I
online
wouldn't think so. I think it would all come down to, because it comes down to,
distribution?
yeah, the end of the line kind of stuff. And most things are based off population, not number of plants. So
Yeah.
I would,
Well, the state requires that you publish on your MOR, your entry point chlorine. Right?
Yeah, that, so
since there's
that,
no entry point happening.
but what you're saying is when that plant comes online, yeah, we'll have to report that. We're already reporting it. We're already gonna be there grabbing those numbers.
So you're keeping data.
Well, no, we're just reporting plant offline. We're like not capturing that data
The
because.
point being is you should be keeping some internal data on that for our own person.
Well, nothing's going into the storage tank, so there's no number to grab.
Well, there would be your entry point chlorine, would be your turbidities, and those should be published every day.
But they're not entering anywhere.
Yeah, there's nothing going in, there's nothing going into the entry.
You're just
Yeah.
you're spilling that water.
Yeah,
And
down
it's
the
not
creek.
chlorinated or anything. That's just spring water running back through and running back out.
Untreated.
So the water that's in that tank's been sitting there for a year or two?
Well, at least since October.
That's up to
That's what I'm thinking, yeah. That's when we also looked up on the computer up there, the time of the CIP. And the CIP has to be done before the plant goes into operation. So that was the last time shown was October.
That's an interesting question. To put that plant online, essentially, you'll have to waste the 1 million gallons that's in there.
And part of the agenda was to come up with creative uses for it.
Right.
Yeah, but yeah, technically, like the state says, just dump it
It just can't be used for drinking.
for drinking. Yeah.
It can run down the ditch and potentially feed farmers down the ditch.
Sure.
Or there's quite a few options that can happen. It just can't drink it.
And the requirement to keep the tank full is a hydrological one to keep the concrete from heating.
Yeah, and it's kind of an arbitrary number. Nobody knows like how much water I need to keep in there to keep the tanks lean.
First question on your test that you'll be taking will be how many pounds of water are in that tank.
How many pounds? We can figure that out.
So that's the metric to determine how much you need to leave in there to keep it from heating.
Probably it needs to be full.
You think? Keep it full all the time? Yeah.
Because if it has to be full, why not just keep it full the way it is now?
Yeah, I don't even
Until
know
it's
if
time
it is
to
full
use it.
now. That might not be all the way to its capacity. It could be able to go up a little more. I don't.
But I wonder if the impetus for finding out beneficial use of that water, is there a problem if it just sits in there, or is the tank becoming less
Well, it's kind of,
usable the longer it sits?
well, it's kind of like, it's a choke point. We have to get rid of that water so that we can put fresh water in it to get into distribution.
Once you have the clock plant up and running,
Yeah.
which is probably a board decision after we get information as to how much it's gonna cost to get that up and running. And that's, and I don't know what that is.
And now that after going in there with Travis today, it's like, I don't think it's gonna take much, really. It could just be like analogs, little modules for the PLC that maybe are corroded or something like that. So just getting that, because all the errors right now are just like electrical communication errors that the PLC is showing us.
And I think only one skid right now is viable to run because of that crack in the tank that we had brought up during the tour, which we were told could be taken down to junction and be plastic welded.
SDS plastics.
So then that's gotta be on the to-do list,
Yeah,
That would be,
as opposed to having to get a new tank.
yeah, but we could run off the single skid that's still viable.
That's number 2 on the agenda, but
Sorry, I just interrupt, but so you're gonna have to get rid of the million and then get it flowing in to ever determine like about the flow sensors and the modulating valve versus that altitude valve. You sort of have to get the plant up and running. to determine-
Well, that would have to be, that could be installed basically, I suppose at any time, but we'd still have to flush that million out. And then we'd have to sanitize the tank, which would, I believe, would come back down to reprocessing that much water and then again having to dump it. But if that was in place, then we could take water from the 2 million and get in there to get the tank back full.
but to your point, it's they're separate projects, like connecting the 2 million to the clock and putting that float valve or the elevation valve as its own separate thing from getting the clock plant running. Yeah, it's like, and with that whole project, they were looking at the 1 million gallons clock plant as an additional storage tank. Yeah, is that clear?
Yeah, that totally answers it. And that connector has never been like started or anything, the connecting the 2 million to the 1 million has not,
I
It's,
don't believe so.
yeah.
yeah, but it's not like we need to run a line from the 2 million down to the 1 million. It's actually like a couple hundred yards out the back door.
As I recall, that goes under a creek or something.
Maybe that's the issue.
I think
There's
the
like
issue is it goes under Bell Creek I'm not Bell, but whatever.
that creek right behind the
Yeah,
clock
exactly. I think the issue is whether we're gonna have to bore that or figure out some way to go.
and the season.
Right, and there's an easement issue there as well.
Yeah.
so we can't do anything to the 2 million gallon tank until that gets taken care of. Because we can't, if we don't have the 2 million gallon tank and we don't have and we don't have water coming from the 2 million gallon treatment to the 1 million gallon tank, we can't provide water to anybody.
Yeah, well, somebody talked about just bypassing the 2 million gallon tank and going treating the water and putting it straight to distribution. And I don't know
And I think
where
that's,
that idea starts.
I think that's a CDPHE issue as to whether you can do inline sanitation. I don't know if that's the right word.
Yeah.
Yeah, but they have to approve it to
Yeah,
get,
well, there, you can, so there's 2 questions. One for JD Hydro is that they're telling us that they want all this information from Clock Tower as if the Clock Tower were online and functioning all the time, right? So the question for them is, I think they're looking at in my view, looking at the question a little wrong. If they view the Clock Tower simply as a backup facility, are they going to need all the data that they're asking for? And we can tell them that we have incoming water at 200 or 300 gallons, and we can give them all that data. And the question for them is, why can't they go ahead and make some projections, assuming that Lamborn's going to be full-time 100% going, and that Clock Tower is going to be backup? And this is a planning issue for engineers. And rather than making us bring this plant online, flush 2 million gallons down the drain, do all the stuff we got to do, it just seems to me that the planning of how Clock Tower integrates is not fully thought out.
And I'd have to reread the JDS hydro report to see if there was any look at that alternative, because from what I understand, they recommend, and it's still the case in the latest paperwork from JDS, they're still recommending that the 1 million be put back online. So yeah, that could be the very thing that is entering into their need to know what's coming through the 1 million. But you're right, if we weren't running it and we said we were going to do it intermittently, which to me, has to be decided with a lot of pros and cons and money. Compare what it costs, what are the downsides of not running it? You know, we haven't done that exercise. Actually had a side-by-side pro and con. But you're right.
The question for CDPHE is, if we run that plant 1 month out of free, right? Bring it online, we actually feed water into 1 million gallons. How long will they allow us to store that 1 million gallons of water and not have it be dead water, right?
Right.
So, and if they say, well, you can, if you test it, do your DBPs and test your chlorine, it could be that we could leave live water in there for as much as 3 months, bring the plant online, and that would satisfy the backup requirements. If we got in trouble at Lamborn, we would have 1 million gallons which would supply the town under rationing probably 4 days, maybe 5 days.
Yeah.
You know, the whole crux of this, though, as I think about it, is we have springs that only can serve the 1 million gallon plant. So I think the point is we need to make sure that we are maximizing the amount of water we have. And again, to me, this needs to be a cost benefit exercise. But if we have water that is just being spilled and never used in town, we are limiting our potential for producing more water. And that's, to me, is the big exercise that needs to be dealt with. Is it enough water that's only dedicated to the 1 million to, I'm having a hard time with words, that to justify running the 1 million, even if it's an intermittent? But I think that's JDS's point. We have a 23 spring system. I think it's 23, whatever. And I believe they were probably told, please tell us what you think using all those springs. So to start knocking some out of potential use by the town could be a recipe for future failure of not having enough water. But again, I'm just talking off the top of my head. I have no numbers. I really think we need a really good pro and con money exercise to decide what to do about the 1 million.
I just want to add to the thought, there's like 419 standby taps currently. And so I think in JDS's calculation, they're considering that, like, what if all those taps came online? What would the demand be now? And then what's the percentage of growth? So we know, let's see, Lamborn has a 600 gallon a minute capacity and Clock has a 600 gallon a minute capacity. So that's our capacity to treat water and put into distribution. So that's one number. But then there's also like, well, what are the springs producing? Can the springs, provide both plants at full capacity? And then, yeah, so because I think part of the question is like, can this town grow with its current source of water and treatment capacity? And what is that growth rate that we can sustain? Also considering that like we're in like what, a 20-year drought or something,
Right. Well, the big grill in the room for years has been the overhang of those coal mine taps.
Right.
And I think they're down to they're just about 400 right now.
But I thought they had 300 and there's another 119 standby taps from.
If I'm not mistaken, all those taps are coming off the Lamborn side. Isn't all that land over there?
The arch taps, they're up there. I don't know about the other.
So if those taps came online, they would be hitting the Lamborn plant pretty hard. And those springs.
Yeah, I don't know which springs are allocated.
We can look at them on the GI, or the GIS.
Well, and for me, that's something I've always wanted. Let's have a big map with the springs shown and make it clear which springs feed which tank, which springs do we only have part of the year, because some of them have to go to Bone Mesa. That's the only way I can think is to see kind of a visual and then a flow chart.
Sure.
Because some of them we don't have all the time, and some flow more than others, and
Well, I'm a big GIS fan, Geographic Information.
yeah,
System.
of course, I know, Gia.
And the town, SGM has finished the base map. So we have a fairly robust mapping
Yeah,
system.
they should
Have you
have the
looked at
springs
that?
on there. We only had
So
demonstration.
my point to this is that these maps become a repository of all your information.
yeah, and it
The
is.
layers and layers. And one of the things I think we should be doing this summer is we don't know a lot about the spring locations. A lot of the GIS information up there is not sub-centimeter, it's foot or 2 foot or 3 foot. And I'm told there's pipes laying on the ground up there and all kinds of interesting things up there. And one of the things we can do this summer with some basic GIS information is to crawl around up there and try and document where those springs are and then build this into our layer so that we can have information about this sort of thing.
Have you guys seen the spring layer?
Yeah, it's pretty good.
Yeah, they didn't identify lines.
Right.
And then I hope you wrote down what you want to capture because I want all that data too.
Well, I'm hoping this, I always rely on this. Well,
Yeah, like it's like color code the lines and then we'll see where they go. But there's no flow meters of any sort up there. So we just have the water commissioner grabbing his total every month, which I don't know how much data is going to provide us. It's something to go off of.
That's not complete though, because unless he knows that it's going to a useful source, he marks it down as a 0.
oh,
So
okay.
there's a lot of water down there that he's marking down as a 0 because he can't confirm that it's going somewhere useful.
So we may have to take on that exercise to get to learn more about those springs that don't have a useful purpose.
Yeah, and really like, I don't know if the town lawyers are like really hip on water rights, but like, we almost need to consult out, like, we got to be careful when we go to make claims because we might be giving up our seniority when we do that. Like there's decrees that are like from 1902 that like don't include that in the next like list of water rights, because that's going to change priorities. So
It's it's just a moving parts of many layers. And I think didn't you all get some water rights?
We have quite a bit of information on, we have more information on Stewart Mesa on the Bell Creek side. And then I was talking to Mark Rober the other day because his reservoir has been of interest historically in the past and maybe a storage site. And I think the Rober family and one other ones have some of the historic rights up there. And Travis, when I talked to Travis, it was fairly vague about how the water management goes up there. Sometimes it goes this way and sometimes it goes that way. And I think that's something we probably need to clarify.
The Stewart Mesa water rights and the town, that was first adjudicated in 1906. And basically, obviously not lawyer talk, in my talk, the agreement was, okay, Stewart Mesa will say, yeah, you own the water rights, but you guaranteeing us that you'll feed us water for forever.
Some percentage of that water right?
I didn't get in that far, but that, I also think that every time they kind of legislate or brought in the lawyers and kept moving on, I think that's changed quite a bit over the years. So I don't know, but I guess now's as good a time as any. The one thing I do want to point out is that anytime the town takes on, they choose to, like they chose to eliminate the problem in Stewart Mesa and on the lawyer fighting by saying, Stewart Mesa, we take control, but we always seem to get water. And it might have been 2019, it might have been some other time, but I heard talk in the trustee area, and this was a while ago. It's like, well, if we're running short on water, then we'll just cut off all these out-of-town users. And it's like,
No,
there'll be guns involved,
we have,
you know, so,
there's an agreement.
yeah, there is.
Downtown users get water. Isn't there? I mean,
Well, I'm the ORC for Germany Creek West, and I was asking Jeff Hennion if we could find some contractual agreements with the town about their, I mean, they buy water from the town just like.
yeah,
People know there's 29 different entities that purchase water from the town.
No, the town only says there's 24.
Oh,
I got a list.
Okay, and 9 of those entities are public water companies,
Right.
which means that they have more than 14 taps.
oh, is that what it takes to be a public water
It
company?
takes 50, if you have 14 taps, you're not regulated.
Oh.
If you have 15 taps. So there are 9 small companies in our ecosystem here that are purchasing water from the town. Each one of those companies has to have an ORC, do their water testing, do all the same stuff that you guys do, lead and coppers and all that stuff. And there's been some angst on that community. We're trying to get those people organized so they have one voice. There's been some angst in those communities about how the water storage would be delivered. At the end of the day, the lawyers come with them, it relies on contractual information, so if you can find the contract.
So have they been able to find the contract at the one you just mentioned?
The other issue with these people we're selling water to is that a lot of the metering systems, you pay by your meter. And we're beginning to measure more accurately water consumptive use by these entities and what the town meter shows, and we're beginning to find some discrepancy. And the question is, whose meter is not working right?
Does it look like the town meter is reporting more than the local meters are
It's
showing?
variables.
Oh, so it goes either way?
But the point being is that if things get tighter, the meter
Yeah,
accuracy is going to be important.
it's gonna matter. Meters matter.
In Stuart Mason's, the town meter and our meter, there's like 3 meters that the water goes through. But the town meter and our second meter should be exactly the same. And
Because there shouldn't be any loss between those two.
yeah, you know, because the pipe's like,
Oh, yeah.
you know, or something. It may be, but the town all meter is always higher than our meter. And of course, we track it all the time. And that's, but that's water gauging.
And you have to wonder, cumulative, it may be with one meter, it's inconsequential, but cumulatively, it could be quite consequential if there's 28 water systems coming off of here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think the other thing, you know, we've had this issue about non-revenue water in the town. When you add up consumptive use and the supplies, sometimes in Paonia, the number is as much as 20%. But I can tell you, looking around the state, that if you get what we call non-revenue water, which is unaccounted for water, if you get that number between 15% or 18%, you're doing good.
Yeah.
So the point being, there's just a lot of little leaks and escapes in the system. So you have to be careful about dropping the hammer on big disparities in water meters.
Yeah, but no, I agree. And the thing is, right now, I feel like we have about 5 competing issues.
Oh, there's more than that.
Well, I'm just thinking 5 that we brought up just now, competing issues that we don't have answers for. And the water rights. And the problem is it's really expensive to hire lawyers to do water rights. And that's not been budgeted for. I mean, it might be necessary, but again, that wasn't in the 2022 budget. I don't think. I don't remember that being discussed. Christina, help.
Okay, because I'm so grateful you guys are here and it's fabulous to be able to just get answers like, So I asked up at the water plant, the 1 million gallon, sort of what do you see as the big chunky like priorities, or is everything happening at once? And I love the way Josh, the past ORC did that big graph, what
The
did he do?
matrix.
Yeah, the matrix that, was just so in layman's terms, like you could see, like, wow, these are the priorities. And then you guys followed suit with that, sort of establishing that with all the other stuff that you do. And are you doing that in the 1 million gallon tank as well? Just like the whole,
Yeah, we started a list.
yeah.
And I think,
And who is like helping you with that? Like, how are you comprehensively? Are you getting like Scott Thomas and Jade? Did you have a meeting with those guys, the Colorado Rural Water?
We did talk to Scott, but just talking to the engineers, I guess, yeah, really like talking to Chris Lancy, he knows that plant pretty well. There was there was kind of like 5 questions in there.
Like, are you feeling now that like you're getting that from Chris Lancy, you're getting that from like, you could call Josh, you could call, I guess, like Travis, is he helping, or you can call him and he gives you that piece and.
Now, is that question specifically for clock? Like, how are we piecing together what we need to do?
Well, my first question was like the big chunky sort of priorities in what you guys are doing, because you're doing everything, really. You're doing sewer and the 2 and the 1 and the. So where are you?
Well, so there's JDS's report and SGM's report, and so we're referring back to that and then just garnering any information from anybody who knows anything about the system and then using our best judgment. And so, like I said at the tour, like the PRV is a priority, because if we have high pressure, then we're out battling distribution breaks, and then that takes us away from addressing other issues. We have this issue of like water leakage. And so like, but we're producing enough, so maybe it's not that dire. But like to address water leaks, like we've been talking about these pressure gauges that we could put into distribution and track that. And we're still trying to get clear, like, I mean, so I've studied like permaculture, and it's really like you don't do anything until watching for a year, basically. And I like personally, I haven't watched a whole year cycle to know where to like say yes right there, right? I'm just taking direction. We're just taking direction and making sure everybody has safe drinking water, and yeah, and just kind of we're putting out a lot of fire, so it's hard to say like we can. I'd love some direction, and instead of like being pointed towards 5 different things at once, just like get the clock going. Great. I'd love to spend a week there. I'd love to spend a week on just any one thing right now.
I guess our priority number 1 though at this is making sure that we are providing clean water. So priority number 1 every single day is basically getting up to Landmore and making sure that everything is good up there, that our tank level's good. And then with that comes making sure wastewater is all in order and that we're in compliance with everything down there. So that kind of always remains as priority number 1. And then we're trying to piece in other things as we can. Clock is obviously pretty high on our priority list too, to get that plant running. And the PRVs, we definitely want to try to get those things going, because we think that we'll see significantly less leaks in our main lines if we can get the PRVs all the way sorted out.
Yeah.
Question, John Tedder, we all looked that day and looked at those things. I never saw his report.
I don't know the order of operation, but we have it.
Okay,
Yeah.
maybe that's another.
and we have not seen that as trustees.
I mean, I think it's Corinna, whoever is in charge, Public Works Manager, Corinna, I mean, they should make sure we have that information.
Mhm.
Did you repeat that report?
Oh, it was the report done by Pipestone on the PRV system. We crawled in every one of those about a month ago, I guess.
Yeah.
And then he wrote a report. My understanding is that there were some upgrades to be made. My sense was that most of those PRVs just needed some regular maintenance.
Right.
In the pilot valve assemblies and then one of them, he thought, as I recall, was way oversized, or
Yeah.
he recommended even putting a smaller one.
Can I point myself to stat keeper? Because I saw a hand and then I saw a hand and I said, so like.
Yeah, I was gonna let Skip know he was next.
We don't have our little buttons.
Yeah, no, that's fine.
We just interrupt people.
Please.
Okay.
I think it's great that your priority number one is clean drinking water. I think that should be, but you were saying you're taking orders, or wondering who you're taking orders from, and has anyone given you orders to like really get that 1 million gallon tank that we looked at the other day online, or is that still just sort of sitting there in the limbo and you would be waiting for somebody to say that's a priority at this point?
So it seems like with clock, it's like, let's demonstrate that it can be online, but what's the point in running it right now? Because we have so much water, we're just gonna be wasting a bunch of water. And so it's not like, it's not, but then it's really important for the 2 million gallon storage tank. Like we need that plant online to address that, but that's coming down like next year. So, it's like, I think Corinne is getting direction from the committee and the board of trustees and then relaying it to us. And so that's where the direction is coming from. And the million, it's like, I think we're just trying to satisfy JDS so we can lift the moratorium. But I feel like there's like, but it's kind of confusing. It's like,
Ridiculous.
what? Yeah, isn't it? It's like, it's for what? So that Paonia can grow by 20% a year, or what? It's like, what? It's like, we need to go back to like land use and strategic planning to be like, what the hell do we want this town to look like? Even, it's like, so.
I agree.
So, yeah, so I don't know. I feel like there's like even higher level conversations that need to be had. So we're like, let's spend money on this so that we can achieve that long-term goal, so.
You and your permaculture way.
I know.
It's not making so much sense.
And did you get your question answered, Skip? Let me ask something, since number 3 was the PRVs. So is John Tedder's report what you're using to develop the request for proposal?
Yeah, and then there was the whole piece around like, well, and maybe, so like JDS, I don't know, did JDS defer to John to fine tune their report? Was that how that worked?
I haven't seen any of the communications. I've talked to John on some other matters. I use him for other companies.
Okay.
And, I think their proposal was pretty straightforward. And the question is whether he prioritized which of those valves are most important to rebuild.
He didn't do that. He just looked at each one and said, this one needs that one needs that one needs that. And then JDS actually came up with we should take that 12-inch PRV and bump it down to a 6. And then John just came along and said,
The other thing is we have 2 engineering companies that we've dealt with. SGM is one, and I believe Brand Bear is on a.
Brandon Bear is at SGM,
Yeah,
right.
I mean, he's SGM, but isn't he considered to be the town engineer right now?
not officially.
Not officially.
No.
I mean, one of the
trigger
things
on
we've
that.
struggled with over the last year is that there's a lot of cooks in the soup and nobody seems to be really responsible. Corinne has said that, she's responsible, and we now have a new public works manager who I haven't met. So how does he, I think I argued about this in the letter we about I'm a retired military, so I'm really in favor of chain of command.
Mhm.
So the question is, who's responsible and who does what?
You're very right.
And I think
We
the
need to get that
council,
established.
I visited the council about that repeatedly.
Yeah, and
I think-
it's really the trustees make the final decision, but they have to be given enough information to make an educated decision. And that's the nebulous part for me right now, because PRVs are very important, and they did have several in the JDS report by number with certain specific recommendations but not for all of them. if I remember right.
There should be 9.
Right, but I don't think they have identified all 9 with recommendations, if I remember correctly. I'd have to go back and find it. But so we need to make sure that this request for proposal is integrating what John Tedder said and what JDS is saying. So are you part of the construction of that request for proposal?
No. And the last conversation we had with Corinne was that she was gonna go back to JDS to
Do that.
clarify everything, right? So that the RFP is very specific, like this volt needs this.
And very prescriptive, because we'll get the
Yeah.
best. And thank you. That's good to know. And as trustees, I only learned about it at the 1 million gallon tour, that is going on. So I hope we should talk about it some tomorrow, because that's kind of been our broken record. Those PRVs have got to get upgraded so that we stop having so many leaks in the street. We're spending a lot of money making repairs that we did not budget for. And you had asked in your email, why are we not just going with John Tedder? And we really need to do, yes, because we just need to make sure our money's being spent
Sure.
the best. And if his is the best proposal,
Well,
all better. But we just can't keep doing sole
PRVs
source.
are very picky, specialized kind of
Yeah,
devices.
so he may be the best
Yeah.
if he even submits a proposal. I don't know.
He kind of did, it's estimate.
Okay, so in his report, he has an estimate already?
It was, I think it was between what, 50 and 75,000.
And he didn't calculate them all. Yeah, but it's,
Well, as a trustee, I have not seen any of it. So, it makes it hard as a trustee because the trustees ultimately have the final say. But we also don't want to make a decision that's done either in haste or in a vacuum. So,
but so I literally have it in front of me right now. And like, can I share it? I don't understand the process.
I think you have to ask Corinne to share it with the advisory water committee and ultimately the trustees, but in her mind, it might be premature, but we definitely need to see something because we have to approve spending the money to get it done.
Now, is this one of those things where I could show you, but I can't send you a hard copy?
Yes, and I don't even want to look at it
Okay.
because again, I am only one trustee
Okay.
and I'm one of
So
6.
I think the chairman of this committee, you should request Corinne that we have this information.
Yes, no, I will do that, but I don't want to look at it right now.
Okay.
I don't want to know anything else more than the trustees know. I have to be careful about that, but I will ask her to, at a minimum, get us the information for the advisory water committee and if it's ready, all the trustees need to see it. Because if we're going to be asked to make a decision, and normally we also are given the opportunity to see the proposals that come in and help to choose those. So there is that, I'm just not aware of it at this point.
So as an action item for this committee, can we recommend that a priority be given to the PRB strategy
Like that.
by whoever the boss is? I like to say that, but I mean, as an action item, we vote that PRBs are on the top of our list for importance, and those action items needs to be taken care of.
Okay.
And also send us information. I'll send you information.
I'm just voting aye, just like we're going to do the Robert's rules. Yeah.
On another, are we?
Hang on one
are we
second.
done?
Christina had a question.
Interject something real quick. So on tomorrow night's agenda is also the ORC, which had the RFP for the ORC, so that is up. And that is an ORC to potentially understand the systems and direct people.
Yeah, that came out before Benny was hired. The RFP went out. And then Benny Archuleta was hired while I believe the first proposal was out there. And then we extended the proposal by another month and only extended the request for proposals by another month and only got one. So there's a little bit of competing understanding about the proposal that came in, which is in the packet. I haven't read it yet. And Benny Archuleta has a contract, which is different than a proposal. So I don't know how we're going to rectify that tomorrow night.
But I'm saying the ORC would be the one to make these determinations and come to board and then.
Not necessarily.
No, not necessarily. Okay.
It was the public works director. But then there's the reality of it's too much for one person to handle, wastewater, water, parks, streets and everything. And that like we're assigned specifically to water, wastewater, with this idea that, I don't know, maybe we're gonna have 2 departments, you know, and I'm just, that's my understanding. It's
Yes,
like
that's
2
how the budget
departments.
was set up.
What's
With 2
that?
departments.
Right.
Set up with 2 departments.
So it's almost like this department is missing a head right now.
And so that would be an ORC, like,
Again, not necessarily, an ORC keeps you compliant with the state.
okay.
Yeah, and then like with the town of Paonia, an ORC will also like just manage that entire enterprise budgeting and everything, but we have a financial controller who does all the budgeting for it. So the answer is not necessarily, it could be, it definitely could be.
And at the time, it was designed for Travis. The position during the budget session was designed for Travis to become the public utilities director, and he's licensed in both. But now that's changed, so it remains to be seen. We will be in that spot.
I'm ORC for 5 or 6 little companies, and to answer your question, the town requires a B rating, a B certified operator.
For Lamborn,
For
yeah.
Lamborn primarily. And the problem what we're having throughout the state is finding certified operators. And historically, the idea of the grandfather ORC who knows all, tells all, trains people and does all that is kind of falling by the wayside. And what we're finding is that communities are having to hire people with credentials, and basically all they're doing by and large is making sure you're compliant with the state, filing the MORs and doing that stuff. Now, town, I don't know Benny very well, but I don't know what his contract says or what your relationship is with him. But, you know, he should be sort of your go-to guy, in my opinion, or the engineer, either hydro or when you have problems, you know, what do I do with this? Or the builders of the equipment, like Filtertech and that crap. So to answer your question, the ORC's come in many flavors, and I think the town personally was sort of up against it. We needed a B operator. And as you saw, there weren't a lot of people applied for the job. So I think we can build with Benny, whatever you guys want. And maybe the town should instruct Benny what we want of him. In other words, more than just a fill in the blank guy to do the MORs, right?
But he answers all our questions.
Sure.
He's very responsive. We
He's a nice guy.
I think we're like, this is going on. What do we need to do? And he gives us direction and everything.
And I think that's what his contract kind of requires, that he's not on site all the time, but he's there to answer questions. But I have to reread the contract. So
Sometimes even more. I mean, he was present in our wastewater inspection and everything, and then he was present the next day for the clock tour. He runs our samples down. We'll take the samples, but he'll take them down for us and everything. So
Good. That's good.
He's on top of it.
Right.
Yeah, and just again, to your point of like, where's the direction coming from? It's really like, we need to figure out the town budget.
Yeah.
And establish priorities, and that's not gonna come from an ORC, it's gonna come from a committee and a council.
And sort of my point was, like, if it's an ORC, it should, all that detail and stuff should come through you guys, because you're established here and you're working, you know, your way and learning and growing in it. And also by the board, sort of like integrate that to determine what works in the systems. Yeah, that's all.
Yeah, and we've been wanting to come to this meeting, this standing meeting for a while now. I've just been busy with other things, so.
Well, we haven't had one in a while.
Okay, yeah, I think that was the other issue. And, you know, I asked to be on this board and the town council, but I can't as a public works employee, so. But yeah, you're right. It's like, we're the eyes and ears on the ground, totally.
Right.
Yeah.
And you guys are all about, which I know, and I so appreciate, about transparency and communication. I really get that and feel it. And it seems like it's this new day of everybody communicating together for what really works. Makes sense to me. Thanks.
So when we finally get to your Public Works report, I think it's been postponed for 2 meetings and I think it's in this agenda. Will Corinne be answering our questions regarding it? You won't be there?
Well, you're saying public works, we're water, wastewater.
Well, we got a report that I think it was listed under Public Works and it was, but maybe it wasn't, but it was your report on what's going on at the sewer plant and
Oh, the status report?
yeah, the status report.
Yeah, the status report was from me.
And you won't be at the meeting tomorrow night, but
I'm gonna try.
okay. I
Yeah,
hope
because I just want to facilitate clarity.
Yes.
Like, more than anything, because then I want to know what I can work on and I'm like, oh shit, I'm juggling everything, you know? Like,
And hopefully we will make sure that comes up, because like I said, it's been postponed twice.
okay.
It hasn't made it before we adjourned. So, and I think, and your table, I believe, is still in there, your big matrix, colorful, which is a lot of the to-dos, things that we didn't budget for, that we need to determine what needs to get, what we need to make sure we buy. So it's an interesting time to be a trustee. So I have number 4, which came out of our meeting at the 1 million. So I feel like, and this kind of gets to the thing I was already talking about, a pros and cons list with costs associated, because there has been talk of getting a second last line tank. It's just been bannered about that could potentially, and it's, I think we need to actually look at it because I also learned on Friday that there has been talk of renting a 250,000 gallon tank to have up next to the 2 million to supply the upper users when the 2 million is shut down for remediation. And I don't know what that costs. So I just would love to have the ability to start looking at different scenarios with the 1 million getting remediated. And if we don't have the line, what's it going to take? If we don't, let me back up. If we don't have the line to take treated water to the 1 million gallon tank, what are our alternatives and what are the cost benefit analysis for different approaches? Because it seems like we have almost 4 different approaches here dealing with getting the 1 million gallon tank, 2 million gallon tank, empty, lead, remediated, relined. And I don't know how long that's going to take, but the upper people need to be serviced. So there does need to be some sort of storage, or do we get, maybe it's the 5th choice. Do we get CDPHE to allow us to do inline sanitation and not need a tank at all? And 2 million could be used to service the entire upper and lower users, right? The 2 million treatment, it could serve upper and lower,
Straight.
because it's doing it right now.
Just by bypassing the tank.
If you bypass the tank and did all the sanitation in line, could it service all the users?
I don't think it could.
I don't even have enough contact time,
I
right?
don't know, contact time.
So those are the things I feel like we need to have listed in a matrix. Here's this choice.
Can you call out your five that you see?
Yeah,
Name them.
Oh, well, let me see. I'm kind of making it up.
Matrix.
okay, good. Okay, let's go with, we have to have a tank for storage when the 2 million is offline. Because we don't have enough contact time to deliver from the 2 million treatment to all users. What do you call that?
Can I bounce back and forth?
Yes.
Okay, so
Yes.
storage tank issues. So we can either rent a tank, we need to know the cost associated with that versus getting the 1 million gallon tank back in operation, costs associated with that.
Right.
But then we still need to rent a tank, maybe a smaller tank, so that we can continue to distribute to those users up above.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think we need to know which customers can't be served from the 2 million.
What did you say?
Hidden Valley, probably essentially everybody around the 2 million.
Right.
Which that's the only reason the contact time becomes an issue is because it's time to first tap.
Right, so,
So it wouldn't have to be,
Fairly close.
well, you would end up with fairly high chlorine concentrations as well, and you have DVP issues and all kinds of stuff.
We do have our clear well, but it's not very big. So that it would be contact time through the clear well down to I believe right there, rovers are considered our first tap, and that's just down at the end of the driveway.
One other interesting idea I thought of is we've assumed that the water is always going to go one way from the Lamborn to the clock tower, right? But if you had a pump strategy, clock tower, you could use that same line, reverse the flow, and pump it back into the line while you're taking your Lamborn tank offline. You know, that's just an engineering question, pumps and costs, but there might be a way to get enough finished water out of the clock tower, pump it back to serve Hidden Valley, and I mean, it's just a off the wall idea, but and that would be engineering.
Yeah, so you'd have to pump it from the 1 million gallon treatment up to the 2 million
I
gallon.
wouldn't go in the tank, it would go into
Right.
the supply line that's going
Right,
in.
exactly. And then it would go into the 2 million gallon treatment plant and then distribute
No,
it.
I mean, you could make the case that you should finish the water.
At the 2 million?
You should finish the water at the clock tower.
Yeah,
Pump finished water back, and hook it into the Hidden Valley.
right. But to hook it into the Hidden Valley, you
Or
would,
not that one, that.
yeah, you, again, bypassing the 2 million, it would just be a
Water
direct.
relining.
So there's another alternative. What would it take to pump from the 1 million to the 2 million?
Well, I'll add, it's like,
Pump stations and that's.
Yeah, it would be dicey, but.
and we still have to connect to the 1 million gallon tank. So it's like a it's
I
a
think
two-step,
not. You're thinking not, that you wouldn't connect to the 1 million gallon tank?
but you'd have to.
Why you have to, I mean, you're gonna have
Pump
to
it
do,
up to it.
So we still need that couple hundred yards of line.
you're gonna, yeah. when-
That's an arbitrary number.
Yeah, that's
Right, but I'm just,
Yeah.
but this is, so we need to know, what does that cost? Can we go under a creek and can we get the easement? So what's so funny to me is I've never heard this before, and we've talked about the altitude valve being the end all. But it doesn't do us any good if we can't get from the 2 million to the 1 million tank, right?
Right.
So why did that little piece, that's that,
I've been on this committee for a year and a half, and we've been hearing about that little piece for.
and I haven't heard about it. And I've been coming to the meetings, that there needs to be that line put in, and nobody seemed to know on Friday if it was in. So that's why I'm saying, wow, that's a piece that I didn't know about. So there's another thing to think about. So what I was thinking is another alternative, do we get a second tank up at the 2 million and start using it while we clean the old 2 million? And then we've got 4 million gallons of storage, which would be better than doing. Yeah. I'm thinking
Okay, so what size tank are you
I
talking
don't know.
about? as a replacement
Well,
for the-
Thomas Markle had gone and so, okay, and Phil too, and had looked at what a 2 million glass line tank would cost.
Oh,
And it was almost 1.6 million. That was just, and it's adjustable. And so I'm thinking, what if we got a 1 million glass line tank, half that price? Use that 1 million while the 2 million is down. And then
buy or
then
rent?
have 3 million.
Because now I'm hearing all the options. Are we talking buy or rent?
And I'm talking buy.
Buy.
And I have no idea what it costs to rent a 250,000 gallon.
And do we need a 250,000? Because like,
Do you don't?
that's about how much we use a day, but like, I get, so the vulnerability in the whole thing is if Lamborn goes down, period. And, you know, like if we have a 250,000 gallon tank, that gives us 1 day, big deal.
Oh,
But if it's a 50,000 gallon tank and we're continuously producing water and putting it into the system,
mhm.
Well, the
So-
assumption with the small tank is that the clock tower would be online.
Okay.
It would be servicing most of the community. The only reason to have a 250,000 is to keep Hidden Valley people happy in that line that's going down there.
So then,
so buy a quarter though, if it's just a couple.
Well, yeah, and I would personally wouldn't support that idea. I had,
what, and you wouldn't support renting a quarter? You wouldn't
I'm not
support?
sure I would do that.
Well, let me just, I would just want to clarify for our matrix that is off my head at the moment. So do you think it makes sense to rent any tank up there in the interim? You know, what do you think it costs? And I don't know how long it's going to take to clean up the 2 million gallon tank either. Does anybody know?
Well, I went to the Colorado Rural Water Association
Did they
meeting
know?
and I canvassed, we had about 15 vendors there. And I canvassed everybody and talked to everybody that I could think of.
Mhm.
So let's start down through the list. The first thing would be relining the tank, right? I mean, we had a diver in there and I haven't seen that report about how much lead is in the primer coat. And I think it's not very much, but there's lead in both sides of the tank.
Both
It's like
of them
parts per
has-
trillion is what
Yeah,
the
that's
last
right.
source they told me.
Say it again.
Parts per trillion.
So,
Parts, yeah.
and
Oh, I still have to,
Sorry, don't quote me.
You don't go there, you're not gonna fight the EPA.
No.
So the town apparently got a bid from somebody.
yes, and it's looking like, I
And I
haven't
haven't seen that one.
say, because we've got this, all the numbers right. Let's just say it's 1.5 million to do inside, outside lead remediation and lining. Let's just say 1.5 million.
The problem with lead is that it's a hazardous substance. So as soon as they sandblast it, then it becomes hazmat suits, everything's bundled up, gotta go to a landfill site and all
That's
that.
expensive.
I ran across a company, and I've got these brochures, I can give them to you, or these guys can read them. They're very interesting. There's a company that makes industrial coatings that's huge called Chemnec. They have a product now, this is not an unusual problem, by the way, to having lead inside the lines. They have an unusual product is when you take the tank down, you spray the inside with this particular thing, and then when they sandblast the finish off, this particular product binds the lead, and it doesn't fall under the hazardous disposal thing. And
So you end up with a film, you kind of end up with a solid.
sandblast particles that have bound the lead.
Yeah, and so you can actually get it all out of there and dispose of it.
So what it does is save the $500,000 cost for hazmat disposal, which is a big deal. So these people are willing to come over here at no cost, and I think we need some more bids on this. I mean, I think that
Yeah, I do too.
$1.5 is a big number for this tank. So what this does is would put these tanks down for probably anywhere from 2 to 4 weeks while they're doing that. I ran across another company in Joplin, Missouri that does big tanks all over the Midwest. I'll give you these, and then both the contact numbers are on the back.
Okay.
So there are some options for recoating, and then the question then is, how do we satisfy it? If we take the 2 million offline, how are we going to satisfy our Hidden Valley customers in that line? So that's for future work. So that's one choice. That's replace the tank.
So that's an alternative way of dealing with the 2 million
That's right.
gallon tank than what's currently on.
Exactly. I think
Being presented.
we need at least probably 3. We need 3 RFP bids. And I think these are the best people. I was pretty hard on.
Okay.
These are the best people. So the next choice would be to build a new tank. The current tank we have up there is a welded steel tank, which they're extremely valuable. Almost all the tanks now that are put together are bolted, and they have occasionally had leaks and gasket problems and all that kind of stuff. So it's essential that we not abandon this tank that we have. It's really extremely valuable and well built. So on the question of lead abatement, I talked to the SRF funding people. The state of Colorado right now gets about $22 million from the EPA for funding projects such as this would be. The Biden plan is going to release about another $35 million to the state this year, in addition to the 22. But almost all of that money is directed towards lead abatement. And I think there's a very good chance that in a year, possibly a year and a half, that with a Clearwell tank that we have, we could probably get access to funding that might pay for the whole thing.
Yeah, that's what it's
Yeah.
looking like.
So that begs the question then, if we have to wait a year and a half, and I don't know what the timeline on this rehabilitation is.
I've heard it needs to be done by next year,
Really? Well, we may be.
Right.
Yes.
That's what
and
I,
I'm not sure why. I've just heard next year.
And with those low levels of lead, we could probably file for a conveyance or
Big
advance or
forgiveness.
something, yeah, right? So the other question is, looking to the future, do we need more storage? And it's come up with the JD Hydro plans and others, that possibly surface storage would be a way to go rather than building another tank. Maybe we should
So
build,
I think surface storage is going to be so hard.
dig a hole in the ground. And the only choice
Yeah,
really we
permission.
have up there would be the Rober Reservoir. And Mark Rober's, the town has talked to him repeatedly over the years, but it's really not gone anywhere.
Yeah.
Surface storage right now is hugely expensive. So the next question is, if it's going to be a year and a half, should the town consider building a new storage tank right next to the one that we have?
Right.
And that, then the next question comes, what kind of tank? Well, you basically, in modern tank world, we couldn't afford a welded tank anymore like we have. So you're stuck into the wonderful world of two strategies. The biggest tank, bolted tank in the world is the Superior Tank Company. They're in California. And they can put together probably $1.5 million gallon tank for probably $1.5 million. I don't know. A good rule of thumb is 90 cents to $1 per gallon. Can build a 2 million gallon tank and it costs you $2 million.
Is that just the tank, not all the?
Yeah, and then you have a pad of concrete to do it.
And all the
So
geotechnical.
these people are worth looking into.
Okay.
And the contact information is there.
And theirs are not glass line.
They're not glass
They are,
line, they're bolted together.
bolted steel.
Got modern epoxy coatings, still guaranteed. So the bolted together tanks are a tiny bit cheaper. The cool tanks that everybody likes these days are the glass line tanks. There's one company in Minnesota called Great Plains Structures. And this tank company is very interesting. They came out of the silo business. You remember the old days in the Midwest where you had silos? So they come in, these tanks they're bolted together tanks with membranes, but they start from the bottom and they push the tank up and they build a tank from the bottom up. And the nice thing about these tanks is that you can order up, say, $1 million gallon tank based on your budget, and they can come in later and add another million or another $1.5 million at a future date, which might be of interest for the town as we grow and need more storage.
Yep.
These guys were really impressive. Their names are on here as well.
And I think that's the one that Thomas got.
Yeah, Thomas looked at this one.
Yeah.
This is called Great Plains Structures. I'll leave these with you.
So those are glass line.
Those are glass line tanks,
So
50 years. 60
there,
years.
to me, is an alternative is to look at having a second tank up there so that we can service everybody from above. Not spend money renting a tank.
Right.
And then we wouldn't have to have the clock tank plant running. We could service everybody if
Yeah.
with a 1 million gallon tank, couldn't we? I'm asking Jordan and Jeremiah.
Well,
Yeah, probably.
all we need to rent one is 250,000 a day. We can turn the clock on.
Yeah.
Feed
But-
us.
But if we didn't turn the clock one on, because now I want to start comparing costs.
True.
And so let's say so we have a matrix with the clock on or the matrix with the clock off with buying 1 million, and I'm throwing out 1 million gallon glass line tank. Mary thought that there wasn't room up there. Bill Bruner thought there was. What do you think up there next to the 2 million?
That depends on how much property we actually have left on that, because we have,
I don't
if it expands back up and we take down some of the hillside, we have more room up there. But as it is right now, we'd be pushing it,
Very tight.
but I don't know where property lines
I don't
lie.
either.
That
That might be on the GIS.
Property lines are very accurate. They're on the GIS.
So maybe we could look at that, check the GIS for property, and then you kind of want to be careful how much you dig into a hill.
Are we able to build up instead of more around? Because if we can go up, then
Yeah.
we obviously have.
I mean,
Quite a bit more potential.
these guys said they would come out here, no cost. They would help you design the tank and also importantly, design the base. The concrete structure's got to do a lot of rebar. And if we have space concerns, we could make it smaller and taller, like a cellar. We can make it bigger and fatter. I think the choice is, but right now, we're just throwing numbers out.
Yeah, it's just,
The other last choice would be, which I don't really, they're building pre-stressed concrete tanks now. Where rather than welded steel, they have the pre-stressed panels come in, they can stand them up, weld them together and coat them. And that's another option. And there's a brochure from these guys.
Okay.
So, I'll pass those along. You guys would be interested in looking at them, but I would suggest that Corinne or whoever's in charge contact these people, get them out here so we can get some
Yeah.
free stuff.
I think we really need to start looking at pros and cons and then spend the time to do serious cost analysis and room analysis. And so if we were to put another tank above the 2 million, would we have to have a pump to get from the treatment up to there? Is there enough head?
It into the one that we have now,
Well, no, it'll be down.
it would be down.
I mean, the 2 million gallons shut off.
Yeah, but if we hooked into the same line, then we could
That's just a plumbing.
use the same.
Okay, but would you have to pump into an upper 1 million above the 2 million?
Yeah, the same kind of setup. It's-
That you have
That's what we have now.
Okay, it's just a little bit more of a pump. Okay, so the pump's already there. Yeah, I mean, is anybody else envisioning this besides myself of a kind of a table
Oh,
of pros
sure,
and
yeah.
cons? And let's start getting, I just feel like,
So if we didn't have room for necessarily 1 million gallon, but we could have room for potentially 2 500,000 gallons set in different places to work around any kind of limitations we would run.
Koshka says 310.
Yeah, so we could have,
Major cost there is
All
gonna be
draw
on
off.
the concrete slab.
yeah,
Sure.
And,
yeah, you got that. But,
well, I mean, I think we just get these smart guys out here and get some numbers.
yeah,
But the numbers I'm hearing from Glass Line, and probably the cheapest way is gonna be to reline the tank. If we could probably, I'm hearing numbers like 600,000 or 700,000 for that.
for the 2 million.
Yeah.
Yeah, which we have to do. I mean, we don't want to abandon that, but in the meantime, while it's down, we have to have a good plan
The other
for
thing,
getting
we-
water to everyone.
we need to talk to CDPHE. There's a lot of wiggle room in there. If they know, for example, that you're working on a strategy to get the lead out of there, they might even give us a 2-year extension.
Yeah, I don't know if the 1 year came from CDPHE. Do either of you?
I only heard it at the clock tour
Yes,
myself.
See, me too. So we need to answer that
I can find
question.
that out.
What's the timing? Because this has been, there's been talk of relining this for about 5 years.
Yeah, I know. But I think the opportunity for getting some federal funds is really ripe.
Oh, yeah.
Here's me.
Yes, definitely. And I don't know how long you can hold on to those funds once you get them and have to use them. I don't know.
Who's on that committee, the grant writing committee? Is it just Mary?
It's me and Mary.
Oh, really? Dang.
So Corinne said about some of the money, you had a deadline to get it, but then you had 4 years to spend it.
Was that with ARPA or whatever it's called now, or this latest one?
I think that's what she was talking
Okay.
about, but you would have to verify that talking.
But that just reminds me, you have to get on the list for SRF funding by the end of the month. You know that.
No, I
So
mean,
what-
maybe.
All you got, I think the
They have 6 different timeframes. I do know that through CDPHE.
yeah.
There were 6 different
Well,
timeframes and
The SRF is where we're gonna get the money if we get it.
yeah, and they were saying, I mean, that
And
there's,
all you have to do now is to get your name on the list and have a proposed project. And I would actually go into there and say, we have a proposed project for $2 million for tank relining or new tank strategy.
I need to ask if Mary and Corinne have done that. I do not know.
So
So,
if you're not on the list, then they don't, you can't get.
right. And I know they think they've been working through DOLA, some of the umbrella on this.
Right.
I'll have to ask. So, wow. That was number status of grant funding towards the 2 million. And I'll have to ask that question of Mary. And we were talking about if to brainstorm some ideas with the 1 million gallon tank, and is that a CDPHE ultimate decision?
Of what to do with the water?
As what you can do with the water?
I think as long as it's not going into drinking, I
Mhm.
guess it would be a conversation to have with them, but I think just as long as it's not being used for drinking
Yeah.
water, they don't really care.
So then it'd be the logistics of having to pump it out of there into the back of somebody's truck with those big water tanks that they use
Yeah,
to mostly, well, I know for what horses, to provide water to horses, but cows?
So one idea I had was like, we could check Cause you have to have an account to take from the fill station now, right? And
Mhm.
we should know who the commercial users are.
I think so.
Just reach
They have-
out.
I think they have to have a card.
Right, so maybe we can reach out to all the commercial users and say, hey, get your water from over here instead for a while.
Could you
I mean, it's-
orchestrate a pump coming out of there?
Certainly, yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Is there room though there,
Well,
I guess along the side of the road?
Yeah, well, we have a 4-inch pump that is on a trailer.
We just have to occupy the road a little bit.
But will they consider that water clean water?
Sorry?
If you're pumping it out of 1,000,000 gallon, right?
Yeah,
But right now, it's considered dead water, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, like it couldn't be used for drinking, it could be used for watering a garden though, essentially, and
I think you'd have to be careful though, that the people that are used to getting clean water from this don't think they're getting clean water from that.
yeah, well.
I think that's
You put like
risky.
non-potable on
I
it.
mean, if you want to do, I think the better strategy is to figure out what it would take to run the plant for a month. And if that water in that clear well is good for 3 months, then you have a product you could sell or a product you could catch. And I mean, that goes back to the first conversation we had about,
But that,
talking to CDPHE about how long.
But that
it's
doesn't-
for. Yeah.
but you still would have to drain the tank.
I mean, if you run the clock tower plant once for say 2 weeks every third month, and you fill up your 1,000,000 gallon tank with finished water, right?
I think it's full
Yeah, right, but right now,
with,
right now it's considered dead water because it's been in there.
Right.
But if that were live water that were in there, then it would be a whole lot more useful. I mean,
Oh,
so,
but we wouldn't
that's not the issue.
drain it right now. We wouldn't give it to
No.
commercial users, you know? We would just put it into distribution.
or possibly you could haul it over to Hidden Valley well. So one other question is whether we should.
Wait, Phil, I want to just make sure we're on the same page. So the issue is the water in the tank can't be used for drinking.
It's not potable.
It needs to be drained, and the thought was, it seems like a shame to drain that much water down to the creek
Yeah.
below the tank, but that may be the only alternative. So we're wondering if there's a way to use that water else otherwise. It's not a matter of getting clean water in
Sure.
there.
Okay.
It's mostly, because once it's emptied, or at least emptied until, but you have to leave enough water in there to keep the tank from collapsing. But there has to be some disinfection. More water's gonna have to run through. Once that's empty, clean, treated water is gonna have to go into there to disinfect it. Is that right? Before you could ever use water to users?
That's my understanding at
Okay.
this point, but talking to CDPHE might be
So
different.
we need to get that clarified, and it might be that we just have to let that water go. Because I would not be comfortable telling people who are used to getting potable water in their tanks, in the back of their trucks,
Oh, yeah.
that it's not potable, and then they have to clean out those tanks.
Well, that's why I say
That's a
we
risk.
go after the commercial users as
But-
opposed to the
But the
residential.
commercial users also send potable water to people. I mean,
That's,
we're,
okay, I hear what you're saying.
yeah, and you can't mix the two because you now have a contaminated plastic tank in the back of a pickup.
I think the right word would be more industrial. People
Right,
that aren't
if you-
taking it
right.
Just for drinking.
And it's not enough to run an oil and gas well.
The hemp growth.
And let's not. I don't want it. I'd say
But it's-
no.
no, it's not enough.
My
So-
protesting.
Right, so unless somebody out there has, no, I'm with you, I'm with you.
We can sell it to the hemp guys for 10 times the money.
Yeah, right. Busted.
So here's another.
So that was the issue there, and we're coming up with kind of a zero at this point of some beneficial use for that water, as opposed to just running it down the creek out the back of the clock plant.
Well, that
Can
would
we even do
benefit
that?
somebody.
I mean, no, well, does anybody know where the hell that creek goes?
Yeah, right.
I'm looking it up right now because I don't even know where it
Do you
goes.
know where the creek behind the clock plant
I
goes?
don't know where it is.
Maybe it all comes down to testing it and seeing.
Because you may have a CDPHE
It goes down Lucas Creek. Does anybody know?
Lucas Creek.
Does anybody know where that goes?
What's it called?
Lucas Creek. Oh, sorry. It doesn't go.
Runs.
And so what does CDPHE say to do with it?
Maybe the first step is just for us to test it, be like, this is what our test came
Yeah.
back with.
I know there's a lot of irrigation water comes out of Lucas Creek.
Let me double check. Well, I might have
Okay.
got that wrong. Landworm Mason.
So your chlorine is gonna be long gone. The question is if there's any DBs in there.
Yeah.
And probably there won't be. I mean,
Yeah, and with the chlorine gone, it should be fine to discharge. And I mean.
But you definitely need to know
pH
that.
permitting too, but I'm sure the pH is probably within reason.
It's German Creek, that's German Creek back there.
Is that, well, that goes down to German Creek.
So you definitely don't want to drain it till you talk to the water quality division about whether it's okay to do that.
That's suitable.
They might even want more tests rather than that.
Is that,
The only requirements for the state are generally you can't put chlorinated water underground.
Yeah,
And the other thing is they run through a thiosulfate filter, but there's no chlorine. You guys have just pull a chlorine with your DO standards to see what it is.
yeah.
I wouldn't spend the money on a DVP test just yet.
but at this point, you maybe don't want to empty it yet, because then you still have to deal with leaving enough water in there. I mean, is there a deadline for
We
emptying?
probably don't want to empty it until actually we've gone through running that plant and dumping a little bit more water in there to make sure our plant's
Exactly.
completely ready and up
Right.
to standards.
Right, so that's.
We're back to the question, at the beginning of the
Yes.
seminar. Here, right? Was why do we need, what is the rush to turn clock tower on right now?
I don't
It's
know.
being driven by JD Hydro. And I think that may be,
A lining of the 2 million gallon tanks that we can serve half of the town.
yeah, exactly. So, I mean, those are the puzzles. So here's another idea. If Lamborn goes down right now, if you guys have to take Lamborn offline, Hidden Valley and that line's out of water.
Well,
I mean, if your tank is gone.
yeah, when the tank is gone, then
Has anybody ever considered putting say a 250,000 gallon tank, maybe 100,000 gallons down closer to Hidden Valley?
wouldn't that come down to their water company once it, because they turned into a different water company up over there.
Well, but you sell them water, so I'm just thinking about a strategy that if we can't afford to build a new tank, glass line doesn't work, concrete doesn't work, that we end up having to take the 2 million offline for a period of time. Yeah, we could serve our customers off the clock tower in the town. But it would be beneficial, you could feed water into a small, say, 200,000 gallon tank down in the hidden summit. There must be a geometrically good place down there. It might also be a good idea for the Hidden Valley Water Company. I mean, if you have to go down, they would have a source of emergency supply water. And if you're going to spend money on a 250,000 gallon, I wouldn't do a temporary. I would just put what they call a clear well tank, finished water tank down closer. And that would give you the benefit of taking all of Lamborn offline if you ever wanted to do something serious. So that's another idea.
Yeah, so what I'm hearing there's like distributed storage and like, can these little water companies go get their own funding?
They might.
Now, is it ARPA or is it DOLA? Like they have funding for municipalities to purchase land for such projects. Like they have funding for that. It's like, it could be affordable housing, it could be, land for infrastructure for parks or things like that. But like maybe, anyway, I'm just trying to expand on what you're saying. Like, instead of putting, again, permaculture, I don't like centralized anything. It's too vulnerable, like distributed systems. And so like, I really like what you're saying. And like, yeah, the little water companies could have their own storage tanks. It just provides more resilience, and potentially they could go after their own funding for those tanks.
Yeah, and I think a lot of times DOLA, it's for a community, actually a entity like we are a town,
Right.
but I don't know that for sure, but just what I've been reading, it's more.
But the town could buy the land and then just lease the land to these water companies for their own storage tanks.
Or we could use some of our existing land to have different storage tanks in different places, like the old 500,000. That's a chunk of land that's basically, I think everything's been condemned there, but we can go through and clean that up and erect a storage tank there.
Yeah, it's gonna cost about, what was it, $50,000 to dismantle that, I think, on previous budgets, to get rid of that.
Give me a machine, I'll go do it.
Maybe you'll need it. Maybe you'll need it.
Well, it's
like a million gallon tank water right into the house.
It's cracked. It's just like.
And it's open, it's.
Yeah, it's not usable.
We'd want to start from scratch over there. It's pretty bad.
So do you know, has CDPHE been asked, have sat down and heard what we are saying? Do you know if CDPHE has understood where we are, that we have this and this, but we can't do that because of this and we have that and that.
We talked to him about the 1,000,000 gallons and we talked about DBPs. I don't even remember who we talked to, why we ended up calling them. That wasn't the reason why we were talking to them, but it came up. And they basically said that there's just, you can't distribute it you can't go into distribution.
Yeah, but you, I mean, I think maybe underneath that, your question is like the timeline of things and.
Well, do they have some suggestions? I
Yeah.
mean, they deal with all the water treatment all around the state. If they could say, you know, really, your best bang for your buck might be to do blah, blah.
I've dealt with these guys for 20 years and they won't do that.
They don't want to stick their neck out.
Oh, yeah, you can ask about a friend's system, but you can't ask it about your own system. They don't want the liability.
There is a-
That makes sense. I was at state DEQ. I could see I wouldn't want to put my neck out either.
Yeah.
But boy, we really have a conundrum.
We got more questions than answers.
Yep, but I appreciate all the discussion. And it's been a really nice seminar.
Yes, it has. Oh, this is amazing.
Yeah, but it has been, and it's things to think about, and I need to make sure what's going on with the SRF fund.
So
Just need a water czar to just come up with everything.
I know. Well, we were putting a lot of eggs in the Scott Thomas basket. This asset inventory that he is doing, that we thought he was already doing. And now it's not till July.
I mean,
Look at, and it was drinking water.
yeah, but so he's coming up with like the infrastructure, the architecture for us to input all like the asset mapping. That's gonna be us with an app going around, taking a picture, GIS locating it, putting it in a description, and then.
And deciding how far we want to take it from 5 up to what, 30 to 15 years
Yeah.
or something like that. It's very involved and his basically endpoint was like, this could be a great tool if you want to put in that much work.
No, that's more than I know.
And there may be some grant money for that. The best way to, I know Scott reasonably well. The best way to do that might be to look for some grant funding to get a GIS professional. All the stuff that he's looking in asset management can be put into our GIS database. But it's gonna, once you start getting 1,000 or 2,000 points and hits and this and that, you guys are not gonna want to do that. And so that's a whole other discussion for possible. The maps might be the most critical thing that we need to do.
When you say maps, you mean the
GIS,
spring?
yeah. Well, maps of the spring.
All the assets.
Yep, all the assets on, and aren't a lot of them already posted? I mean, the roads are in there, the curb, the sidewalk.
Just
But not
the water and wastewater
infrastructure.
specific, it's like the PRVs, it's the meters.
Are they in there?
There's no master meters for all the additional systems, and we don't like, which I think is really important, because if there's a system that's just not taking care of their leaks, we need to identify that, shut them off and say, hey, address that, you know, and I don't even know where they are. You know where most of them are, right? Yeah.
I mean, I don't know where some water companies are.
Who reads those? Who's the reader?
Most of the ones for the water systems, I think, are on the, what's that?
They're on the wireless? I don't know.
Yeah, but I think our wireless also been down. A lot of hand reading has been going on lately.
Really?
But some of them I know are always hand read. I mean,
And so,
read.
so that's another thing, those water systems, we really should ask them to clean up their leaks, which we don't pay for, they have to pay for, but they have to be put on notice, and you have to know how much is leaking.
If they have a leak,
Mhm.
I mean, that's,
Yeah, most of them don't.
We need to,
Yeah.
we need to be able to monitor that though, you know, we like at where we supply them, and then that's it.
that's where all those numbers become really important though. What our master meter is reading, what your cumulative meters are reading, is there a loss somewhere between our meter and all your guys' meters?
And who's calibrating them to know where the discrepancy is coming from, right? Because you said you have 3 in a series, right? And there's discrepancies.
Well, yeah, they don't always map and you gotta calibrate it, see, and it ain't never gonna be perfect anyhow. But yeah, we sometimes call, because we have, quote, it's our water system, but if you will, we sublet it, and there's a whole group that goes out that way, and when we see that they're losing water, we do exactly what you say, go find your leak,
You have 30 days or
fix it.
5 days or we're cutting you off or
Sorry, all
whatever.
this talk of leaks.
Absolutely. When
It is a water.
you tell them, we're gonna cut off your water if you don't do something, they listen.
Yeah,
You know, for as long as you just say, we need you to do this. And next month you tell them, we need you to do this. And tell them, we're gonna cut your water off. If you don't do it, then it gets done.
right. Yeah,
So you guys ought to be able to do that to us. If your meter, your master meter's there and our master meter's there. And you ought to be able to see if there's a difference. You gotta say, well, first you're gonna have to argue over whose is right and whose is wrong, but then whoever's wrong needs to fix their meter. But I'm sure, I would assume everybody else does the same thing, you know, and actually, as a board member, saying, hey, our meter says that you're using this much, but your meter at your house says you're using that much, which means you got somewhere between those two meters, you got a leak. It's like, oh yeah, we're gonna look for it. Well, now you're gonna fix it now. Or we're gonna charge you for this, not that.
Mhm. Yeah, there's been a lot of leniency with the town, like, which I get, because like a lot of people aren't fixed incomes. And it's like they wouldn't be able to, they'd be screwed if the town like give them some leniency. And I don't know what the policy is for these contiguous water systems, like if the town has, if there's a leniency policy there.
Then my best answer to that would be as long as we pay our bill, they don't care.
Right.
Yeah, that's great.
Right, yeah, I would love it if we were tracking those meters and it was going into a cloud and we knew the monthly average, and then they're like, oh, look, you're all of a sudden using 20,000 more gallons. It's like, at least like, that's a yellow, right? That's a yellow flag. Let's explore it. Oh shit, it's 100,000 gallons this month. You know, that's a red flag.
Could you do that with SCADA?
Yeah, they do.
Essentially, there's essentially.
It's basically wireless and it comes through the meter people, Neptune.
My water actually comes through another baby water system that's part of Stuart Mesa. And the woman that was running that, she said, I think you got a leak. Says, yeah. So you usually use 5,000 to 8,000 and you've used 20,000 this month. And oh, by the way, I got this big sinkhole starting to develop in my yard, and that's where your meter comes out. Well, I think we need to fix this.
Usually, it's not always that obvious, is it?
No, a lot of times it isn't. Finding a leak can
When I was
be.
in school, it certainly was.
I just have a point of a question of clarification with regards to the repealing of the water moratorium. Now, does that 1 million gallon plant have to be up and running and data from 3 years from the 2 million and the 1 million, or is that up for just interpretation or?
I don't know. I didn't feel like it was a clear answer. The gentleman from JDS,
Well, okay, so the moratorium reads that it's like a state certified engineer has to do the study. So let's just go pay off another engineering firm, you know? It's like, it's kind of arbitrary, it's totally arbitrary. I'm kidding.
Yeah.
But it's totally arbitrary, you know, so.
well, he has to be comfortable enough though to sign off. I mean, he is sticking his neck out and his PE his PE's at risk if he's doesn't. So I understand why it's nebulous, but it's nebulous. I
But
don't,
it's also a good idea to have that bank of data,
yeah,
right?
Yeah, but I don't-
understand.
I mean, are we gonna have to wait another 2 years and 8, 9 months? I don't know.
Well, I mean, that's another thing, I think, Council, we need to ask JD Hydro what their position is on the clock tower plant. We've been over this earlier.
They,
I mean, we
they think
need
it should be
to
ready.
ask them specifically, can we make, are you willing to make any decisions, about the availability of water for future expansion? Does this require, because we need to know.
That's the question I asked, and
If the clock tower plant has to be on and running full-time before we can lift the moratorium, that's a piece of information we need to know about.
yeah.
And
And
ultimately, you'll have an engineering, it still resides in the good minds of the council people. At the end of the day, you can take the engineering thing, say, yes, we agree with that, or we agree with part of it. So, I mean, engineering things are not cast in stone.
no, the problem is I don't know if he needs 3 years for the 1 million.
I don't.
I probably didn't ask that direct question. I have to go back and listen again. It was really, it felt circuitous for me.
Somebody who knows about these things should be asking him these questions.
Yeah, that would be nice because it's not me.
You're gonna have Dave Weber on the council.
Yeah,
I guarantee
he is
you
on.
he will
He's
ask
on.
questions.
Well, and was he there that day? No. Was he there? No, I don't think so.
So,
That was on the, I don't remember if Dave Weber was on.
so as somebody who's like really like concerned about the direction this community is going, like when the moratorium is lifted, is it just gonna be like a free market, free for all again?
I don't think so
Like
because there's not that many
that's-
places
it
to
sort of
build.
sickens me, especially like now that this town is like on the map to be just an Airbnb community. It's just like I'd rather have that conversation first than like help lift the moratorium.
Well, there is
to
a
be honest.
strategic plan planned for June 25th. On a Saturday.
Is that a water advisory board meeting?
Nope, it's the town of Paonia is having a strategic planning meeting. To, I guess, talk about some of that. One thing, we are a little bit landlocked in terms of the town, but.
And I'm not asking that question because I'm a proponent of lifting moratorium. I'm not. I'm a proponent of smart growth in this town, for sure. And I think we need data for,
Yeah,
years of data. And make good choices from that data. So, because yes, the onslaught of development, we don't know how really we can develop here. And we have those looming 400, really, I think it's 420 from those claims alone. So,
In the county, well, at least some of, I think 2/3 are in the county,
yeah.
up here on the Mesa.
370 or something. from
Yeah, which
Marshall.
brings a lot more people in town to shop.
Yes, I think the more information, the better.
Hmm.
On that.
I think there's a lot of house builders, for lack of a better word, who, at least before the moratorium hit, they knew where the Paonia water system went. And so, okay, you've got a Paonia water system that's out of town and all these houses use it. Well, I'm gonna build something over here and I want to run a water line over here and do it. And it's like you said, the town's got to decide. It's not.
Some of that's the county.
It's not the limits of the town that the town needs to be considering. Town needs to be considering the limits of the town and the limits of the area around the town.
That's the county. The
I-
only way we can control it is
You can't-
with water.
Yeah, you may not be able to.
If we can do that, I mean, there might be a takings to say, we're not giving, I don't know.
But you can also talk with the county and say, well,
they already did their planning and they have established what can happen around a town. I don't remember what it is, but that's already been established.
With their zoning.
Yeah, the zoning plan that just came out last year. And I don't know, I'd have to look at it, but we're not totally in control. That's the other thing. I mean,
If Paonia is providing the water to those outlying districts, though, we are in control of that zoning.
Yeah, but again, it's free market.
Right,
Just here's my money. I'm gonna
Yes.
Do what I want. over here.
and that, I don't know if you can say, no, we're not. If-
Right, because then you're like
consider it
discriminating or
taking,
whatever.
Unless you have a good reason to say you can't have the water, which
Well, but
right
they're-
now, that's a moratorium.
Yeah, but I take care of a couple of those companies and they're tap restricted. So it's like German Creek, for example, they have 27 taps and.
And they can't add
and
more.
They can't add more, you can't.
Oh, that's good. So they have
And
self-imposed.
almost all of
limits.
these have either individual HOAs or they have their own little organizations that keep track of them. I
So that
think
might take some.
most people are very interested in controlled growth and know mostly control.
So that'd be good to know about all those companies. Skip.
So is this stuff gonna be on tomorrow's meeting agenda?
No. I mean, no, no.
Just in terms of water, it's just the ORC piece, right?
The ORC, it'll be very limited. This, I will not have time to download any of this. And I don't even know if we get to a water, if we get in the agenda where I could talk about what was said here, it'll be kind of general. Because I don't have time to put together anything and it's really not on the agenda at this point. There are a couple of things related to water on the agenda, which is the water report and the ORC proposal.
How often do you guys meet?
Once a month. Last Wednesday of every month is our new schedule.
Same developer.
No.
When was the strategic planning meeting?
I believe it's June 25th. But no, that's kind of interesting to know. Yeah, 25th, a Saturday.
That would
Some
be-
of the water companies have already self-imposed a limit on taps.
Yes.
Well, yeah, and in some of the contracts that I've seen, they're tap limit.
Mhm.
I mean, the trailer courts that are down across from the high school, I think there's about 40 taps in each one of those. And those are all limited by their space. And so in terms of tap growth for the company that was selling water companies or selling water to, I think it's limited.
Yeah,
And then the second thing is a lot of these little water companies would be very, I mean, if you want to control the little water companies, then you're going to have to absorb them into the town of Paonia water structure. There's been resistance to that, over the years, because once you absorb them, then it's a question of who takes care of the leaks.
what does that mean? If you?
Well, that means that they would be part of the Paonia water.
You call it the Paonia Water District.
Paonia water district.
So you're not annexing them into the town of
No.
Paonia? The town of Paonia is just taking all the
And
responsibility for the lines up until the.
and
up to the
again, that depends on
residences.
contractual obligations.
But I mean, that's technically, we would then be responsible for the service, whatever you call the lines, distribution lines. Is that about it? I mean, would that be the extent of,
They would have meters, custom meter reading.
yeah, and then we'd have to send the bills.
Right. So they're interested in that, but I think the town for now has got too many other.
Oh my gosh, there's no way we could take that on. Yeah, I think we're about done, Cindy.
Are you done, Doug?
I think we're
I
done.
have one last question. Corinne sent out this thing about the improvements in the landward plan. Did you get this? It was
Let me just look at it to see if I recognize it.
This is status report.
Oh, that's what I was referring to. It's in the, I believe that is what Jeremiah put together and it's in the agenda pack.
Okay, because this, one thing I complain about, there's no signature on it and there's no, we don't know who wrote this or,
I did, probably.
it looks, it's very good writing. By the way.
No, it's not.
Yeah.
No, I asked her and I said, should I clean up the grammar?
Yeah.
She said, I'm not gonna share it with anybody. I was like, okay, then I won't bother.
Well, thank you for writing.
Yeah, no, it's really helpful. Very.
In the future, sign your name and put a header on it.
Well, I did.
Well, and again, that's
It had-
Corinne.
it had a
We have
letterhead
to-
and
Is that
everything.
yours? Oh, really?
It had a letterhead on it.
Okay, Corinne, yeah, she did.
She just took the-
that in
she just took
agenda
the
packet,
word.
but, I mean, you could ask her to.
The third thing,
To add it.
Madam Chairman, is.
Yes, ma'am. Sir.
As we develop things to do, historically, we have given the list to Corinne.
Yes,
And then over the course of the last year, it has generally disappeared into the great void. So I guess what I'm asking is that we have some accountability and responsibility if we're going to meet and make
Yep.
conversations. And it simply has to go somewhere.
So I can't do it tomorrow because I'm gonna get ready for the meeting tomorrow, but I will put together kind of a summary of what we talked about and some of the needs, including the PRB, which could come up tomorrow in the meeting, for all I know. And if it does, I'll share it.
Okay.
But I will try my best to re-listen to this and synthesize and even talk about the desire to look at some varying approaches to dealing with a 2 million gallon tank getting.
We've got about 5 or 6, right?
Yeah, but I mean, and then the different scenarios. Do we get a new tank? Do we don't have the line, we can't use the 1 million, blah, blah, blah.
My first pass is gonna be very crude.
Oh, good, good.
Yeah.
Do you want to share that with me?
It's just, I gotta synthesize that a little.
All right, then.
first. Yeah,
Yeah, if you don't mind sharing it with me, because I was just scribbling notes, not.
that's what I was doing too.
Okay,
So
well then,
far.
why don't I will share what I put together, of course, with Corinne, and she can share with you then.
Okay.
And, but I won't get to this until probably next week.
That's right.
But yeah, I agree. It needs to be more prescriptive, more of a, this is what we decided, let's do this.
The last item is, I just want to thank you guys. You guys are doing an awesome job.
Yeah.
And second thing is, for those of us that have some experience, can we talk to these guys? I mean, what's the rule book these days about who you can talk to?
I can't.
Who you can't?
I mean, you wanna talk like general, like operating?
Yeah, operating stuff.
Yeah, it's like where to get. I mean, you and I could just go out on the street and talk to citizens at that point. 'Cause we're not talking distribution or anything, right?
I'm precluded, but you're not,
Oh.
unless, neither one of you are precluded to talk to anybody.
Yeah, but if we're talking to you, we're talking to you as an individual, not as a member of this,
Right.
because this committee has no authority except for
Right.
our great leader will tell the above world, this is what they thought about it. And like Phil said earlier, over the last year and a half, it went up into the heavens and it stayed.
Yeah, I'll just say that
Do
like,
my best to.
I can't take direction from you guys, obviously, and then like we can't share things that are like the public isn't supposed to know.
Oh, sure.
Like, yeah, where that spring is or something like that. Yeah,
I think a lot of, we're trying this summer, if we have time, we just spent up on the mountain looking around.
Kind of have the same thoughts.
Yeah.
Really
You know, I
like to
mean,
get over
really,
there.
and then taking pictures and getting some GIS shots.
And that's something I'm gonna talk to Corinne about.
I would be really interested to know how he actually manages the water up there. It sounds.
He just records. He doesn't manage anything. He's taking numbers.
He's just taking numbers, puts them under the rock and.
So
He
like
uploads
the state, the state has agents and districts and they compile all the data and then
Right.
they decide, hey, the river, we're putting a call on the river.
He must be doing some turns up there. I mean, there's some splits up there, must be. some-
Okay, so yeah, I guess if there is a call, if there are like senior water, right?
Right, there's calls and he'll direct that.
He'll direct that, yeah.
So I'm gonna adjourn this meeting, so Cindy can go home and we can shut this down. And thank you. And in the meantime, for either of you two, if things come up, let me know about agenda things to talk about at the next meeting, because I was kind of winging it. But thank you both.
Well,
Thanks for
you.
this. It really was a seminar, which I think was really helpful. Thank you.
Commission meeting ever.
It was very helpful.